So, as the host of a podcast, it's my job to, I think, make it seem like I have some idea of what's going on here. So there's a question of whether for this episode, it is a good idea for me to lead with how I feel like I'm in over my head. But of course, that's what I'm going to do. My whole brand is built on the premise that I'm just a dog chasing cars. Welcome to episode 6 of In LinkyLand. My name is Tony Albrecht, and as I was preparing for this episode and reading up on my conversation partners, Tara Horstmeyer and Nick Bennett, this was the first one where both of the other people in the conversation have been at this LinkedIn game a lot longer than I have been. And by a lot longer, it's a year and a half. But Tara's network's at 25K and Nick just passed 40K. And they're both really good at what they do. And that's not to say anything about my folks I've been doing this with for the previous 5 episodes. I've had some heavy hitters in there as well. But this is the first one where I really felt like the junior participant in the conversation. And I tried to use it as an opportunity to shut my mouth and listen more. And there's a lot to listen to in this one. Nick is the director of evangelism and customer marketing at Alice. He's also the host of Rep Your Brand, a fantastic podcast. I mean, really, I blew through like 4 episodes in preparing for this podcast. And those are succinct, really efficient, and really juicy episodes with a lot of great people, most of whom you can find here on LinkedIn. So I definitely want to plug that podcast. You can find a link to it in the show notes. Tara, we get in this a little bit, but she came to LinkedIn and started creating content through her time at Gravy and working with Casey Graham, who has been a pretty big figure on LinkedIn over the last couple of years, though he's gone away, I guess, really this year, most of 2022. But Casey's actually the common link, or how I got connected with Evan Chastain, who was on episode 4 and is the producer of the podcast you are listening to right now. And Tara's now out on her own with Happy Words, her ghostwriting and consulting business, where she works with executives on LinkedIn strategy and execution. And this episode, you might want the notes handy. I mean, I came away with ideas or just ways of thinking about different aspects of engaging on LinkedIn. We talked about choppy copy. We talked about having a mastermind in your pocket, talked about pressing pause before you press post. I mean, just these really digestible ways of thinking about different aspects of the platform that by the end of this episode, I promise you'll be better at LinkedIn than you are right now. So that being said, I don't think you need to hear more from me. Let's just get after it, right? Yeah, let's go. All right. Tara, Nick, thank you for being here on the podcast. I'm looking forward to this one in that it's a little different than the first 5 episodes, and that I didn't quite realize it until I was prepping for this one, but this is the first episode where I am really the new guy in the room. in all of the previous episodes, most of us have kind of started in 2021, more or less, other than one. And in this one, I'm here with two bona fide, legit content creators on LinkedIn. So I'm not going to say I'm a little intimidated, but I typically in these episodes, I like it when we roll for like 15 minutes at a time and I don't say anything. In this one, I'm expecting that I may be able to go for 30 minutes without saying anything at given points. So thank you so much for being willing to come on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Cool. So we're getting into authenticity. That's going to be the main rabbit hole we're jumping down. One of the buzziest of buzzwords on LinkedIn, and one that people have really strong opinions about. And I know that the two of you have a lot of insight into the power of understanding that word and how to effectively embody and leverage it with what you're doing on LinkedIn. But since this podcast is about the power of creating and connecting on LinkedIn, I want to start with your stories about LinkedIn and how the platform turned for you from being one thing to being this place where you've managed to build these really engaged, sizable followings. Where Tara, you're about to break 25,000, I believe, in your network, and Nick, you just broke 40,000. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
And I actually already kind of know this story since I listened to the podcast the two of you did on Nick's Rep Your Brand. But yeah, if we could just spend a little bit of time on that, on how you came to have that sort of Matrix-like moment where the platform opens up and turns into this totally different thing. Tara, how about you lead us off?
Sure. So my journey began 3 years ago this fall. So I love this time of year because it always reminds me of how I got started on LinkedIn. And I think, like a lot of people, I had no idea that LinkedIn really existed other than what we all did, which is, when I kind of went into the corporate world and heard more about, okay, well, this is LinkedIn thing. It's really a place, like everybody says, to hold your resume. So 2008, I think I like signed up, I don't even know if I had a profile picture. I'll be completely honest. Connected with some coworkers, some past people I went to school with. And that was really it for 13 years until, 2019. So 2000, fall of 2019. Right before, all heck broke loose. My CEO at the time, Casey Graham, a lot of people know him at Gravy. He did kind of the same thing. I think his story was that he actually signed online randomly one day, didn't know his password, nothing. And I think he was going to like cancel his account or something. It was one of those just like randomly ended up on LinkedIn. And all of a sudden, I think he talks about it, but he saw a post from Sarah Brazier that just blew up. And he was like, oh my gosh, where did this content creation platform come from? Like, I had no idea. And so he started talking about it internally. And at that point, I was an SDR, leading SDRs, kind of building out that part of our business. And I just saw him make so many connections, learn like that to me, because I was in, and I still am in sponge mode. So I saw him connecting with people who, Josh Braun, Sarah Brazier, Rosa, RevOps, awesome. So all of these people he had incredible calls with, and then would come back in Slack and tell us about everything he was learning. So I, of course, started following his journey and just really made it my own because I loved how he was connecting. I got on a call with Sarah Brazier 3 years ago, and she just really demystified LinkedIn, as far as being an SDR at that point, and then how to build out that strategy. And so my whole goal was, hey, I'm just going to learn, like I am not in content creation, but like that never entered my mind. I just really started connecting with people, specifically in the sales world, who I was learning like a madman. I always called, LinkedIn my mastermind in my pocket, because really for the first, 6, 8 months, I did everything that, people kind of tell you not to, but I don't. I'm like, just do what you got to do. So I just lurked. I learned, and I made a lot of connections in the DMs. So anytime someone would post something, I would connect with them, shoot them a message, just thank them for like, hey, I learned this, or I used this trick, or, and then I started commenting. I was like, oh, I'm going to get public, and I really just learned by watching Casey just come out, and really put himself out there. And then after a while, I'm like, well, shoot, why am I not, just sharing what I'm learning and what I'm doing? And so it was in June of 2020 that I really got my swimming legs under me and started posting, and never looked back. So that was the start of my journey. Now, in those 2.5 years since then, things have changed a lot. I think the biggest part for me in the whole authenticity angle is that I never really learned how I was supposed to do LinkedIn. As in, like, I didn't have people kind of like, this is how you do XYZ. I just did what I felt was natural and comfortable. And honestly, that's how I've approached every single role or everything I've done, is that if it doesn't feel good or authentic or genuine, because I love to replace authenticity with the word genuine. If it doesn't feel genuine to me, then I know I'm not going to sustain it. I'm not going to keep it up. I can, it's the whole like fake it till you make it. I'm like, I can do that for exactly 2 seconds and then I'm out. So I just don't enjoy things like that. And for LinkedIn to become something that was sustainable, as in not just jump in, do something real quick and then jump out, but if I'm actually going to develop a voice, try to help people, try to, even just get things out of my own brain, it had to be a place that I felt I was showing up as much as me as I understood at the time. And so it's been a transforming experience, because of course I've transformed a lot in the last 2 years, and I've grown, as I think most people do. So my content has changed and grown. What I talk about has changed and grown. But I think most of all, my dedication to want to bring who I am and really what I'm feeling, thinking, doing at the moment remains the same. And so I'm not somebody who schedules content, because I'm such a feeler that if I don't feel that post, I'm not posting it. I'm not going to write it. I'm not going to put it out in the world. So I take a little different approach, but that's just me staying genuine to who I am. And so that really has been my journey of kind of how I started and really where I am today.
Cool. And I've got a couple thoughts based on some of the things you said there. I'm going to hold off on those for the moment. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, for me, I'm a traditional field marketer. So, field marketing to me is being out in the field with the sales team, driving middle of funnel, bottom of funnel pipeline. And so being a field marketer, I put on a lot of events, or I have put on a lot of events over the years, thousands of them. And I was always the person on LinkedIn that would hit share on a company post, and I would add no context to it. It would literally hit share, go sign up for this webinar. Now, if someone was to see that in the feed, like, why would they go sign up for this webinar? Because some random person that's a field marketer posted it. Like, there was nothing behind that. And I was doing it so often where I was just like, share, and I was like consuming stuff, but I would always scroll. I would never comment on other people's things. And I've had a LinkedIn. I mean, it was probably, I graduated college in 2010. So, shortly after that, I actually moved into sales, and I remember creating a LinkedIn from that. And I never did anything with it. And I was just like, oh, all right, this is cool. I was like, I see this platform as a way to basically like, this is how you find jobs at the end of it. And I worked for a company called Clary back in 2019. And Kyle Coleman, who I'm sure people have maybe heard of on LinkedIn, he was actually my boss. And so Kyle is someone that has always been, he's been creating content for a while on LinkedIn. And I remember we were in Laguna Beach. It was actually February of 2020. And we were doing our revenue kickoff. And it was, sales, marketing, CS, basically all revenue functions that were there. And he was like, hey, to his direct reports, he's like, hey, this is all the benefits that I've seen from creating content on LinkedIn. I'm going to put out a challenge to my direct reports. And, why don't you create content for the next 30 days? Nothing crazy, just stay consistent for the next 30 days. And he kind of gave us like ideas of what to talk about. And he's like, for me, he's like, why don't you talk about field marketing? He said, literally out of, at the time, it was like 680 million users on LinkedIn. He's like, no one talks about field marketing, the misconceptions of what it is to a revenue organization, how it impacts, how it's more than just events. Although there's such a thing that people think like, oh, you're just an event planner at the end of the day. And I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. I like that. And so I stuck to it until 30 days goes by. Like literally no one was liking my stuff or commenting on it. It was literally right as the pandemic happened, because we got back from Laguna Beach. I remember flying back from there to Boston, and I'm reading on the news like, oh, pandemic, coronavirus, like, watch out. And I'm like, oh, is this really going to turn into anything? I remember talking to a few colleagues that were with me flying back. And then obviously we know what happened with that. And this became my pandemic hobby. And I literally stuck with it for 30 days. And then I stuck with it for 3 months. Then I stuck with it for 6 months. And I talked about field marketing for the majority of the time. And again, no one was really liking my stuff. I was just creating content. But I said, you know what? I like a competition. I like when people challenge me to things that I'm not typically have done before. And I'm not a great writer. I'll be completely honest with you. Like, I actually don't enjoy writing. I have gotten a lot better over the last couple of years, but it was just something where I just didn't really enjoy it, but I understood how to write LinkedIn copy, because for me, I call it choppy copy. And so like, I understand how to like break up the lines and how to make it flow easily. Someone that's, scrolling their feed, how to make it like basically, something that people would want to read. And so I stuck with that for a while. And it was about 6 months in where I saw a little bit of traction. By a little bit of traction, I mean, like I would get like 2,000 views on like a post of mine and like maybe 10 comments or like 10 likes. And I was like, all right, cool. So I just stuck with it. And now we're like, it'll be in March of 2023, it'll actually be 3 years of creating content. And I'm talking about like, I have only taken 2 breaks maybe over that span. And like by a break, I mean like a week and a half to 2 weeks break. And it's usually around the holidays. And then I got super burnt out this past June. And I went on like a family vacation, my first one in 4 years. So yeah, it's been really, really crazy. And honestly, I can't thank Kyle enough for challenging me to start to put something out there, because he was always like, listen, this is going to be the way that you level up both personally and professionally, and you're going to punch above your weight class. And it was always something that stayed with me. It was like, all right, cool. Like if I see what Kyle's doing and how successful he is, why can't I do that as well? Just from a different lens. I mean, he talks about SDRs for the most part. And like I was talking about field marketing, and now I've branched out and I talk about a lot of different things, but it was such an interesting journey. And if it wasn't for him, I'd probably still be that person that's just hitting share on a company post.
I love it. I feel like our journeys are so similar. I mean, both, you had Kyle at Clary, I had Casey at Gravy. And I think that is the power of having someone go before you and somebody really just letting you borrow their belief of like, hey, you can do this too. Like, I love how you said that it really becomes what pushes you personally and professionally, that helps you punch above your weight class, because that's exactly how I felt. And I think you and I were both interesting too, where a lot of people say, start wide and then, niche down. And you and I both started, very, very narrow and then went wider. So it just shows that there's so many ways to engage and start. But I love how Nick and I have such similar journeys. And I think I'm the one who like keeps encouraging him to take breaks, because I take a lot of breaks. That's probably where we're different. I'm like, oh no, I don't need to do this every day.
I know. And I need to do a better job of that, because I feel like one other thing is like this platform has absolutely changed. Like LinkedIn as a platform has changed even in the last 18 months than what it was like when we first started creating content here. It's like, it's not the same. And as more creators come on and start to create on LinkedIn, I remember reading, this was a couple of weeks ago, but 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 1% of users created content. I don't know. I mean, at the time, say 650 million users. So 1% of that. In the end of 2022, I was reading it might be as high as 4%. And I think I just read they're up to 810 million users right now. So you think about that, 4%, like that's a dramatic jump over just a short span. And obviously, as more people come on and start to flood the platform, organic reach is going to continue to go down. And I mean, I know I've personally seen that over the last since September, actually. But if you're in it, we can get into this. If you're in it for like, just the views and the dopamine hits, we're in it for the wrong reason.
Yeah, I see that too, because I think you and I both have the heart of what's going to sustain us, and some people, what sustains them is the rhythm of like, hey, if I'm not creating twice a day or once a day or, 5 days a week, then I get out of rhythm and I can't get back on that horse, whereas I am a little different where it's like, if I am creating 5 days a week for me personally, because I'm in a little different game or a little different boat, then that's actually going to burn me out a lot faster than where I usually stand around 3 to 4 times a week and then comment and engage like crazy. Because that to me is the fun part, because LinkedIn is really, I say this all the time, it's my sandbox. Like this is where I come to play my personal content, where I come to connect and I come to have fun because of what I do. And the fact that I am writing so much content, not for me, but with my clients. So I am creating much more than the average creator, but yet in order for my content and yours too, I think, to be genuine, to be authentic, to where I'm not starting to sound like someone else, it's interesting that, you can take both takes of like, hey, I need to stay with this and I need to stay on it, versus me where I'm like, I actually need to pull away some, and I need to make sure that because, of the way I write and the way I have to connect emotionally with my writing, which is like, I go against every rule in the book. God, everybody's like, disconnect, you care too much. Well, and I'm like, no, like I'm a writer. So when I put something out there, like I'm putting a piece of me out there and I'm not ashamed of that. And so I definitely feel like it feels good, but it also takes a toll that if I was doing that 2 or 3 times a day, I think I personally would have just way too much, of a pull on, rather than it being a place that I love to come and have fun and really support other people. Because if I didn't post one thing, I know I would stay on LinkedIn forever just to show up for you guys, to show up for other people, and just learn and be a sponge and really support those who I love to support. And I'm lucky enough to be able to share my thoughts a few times a week, without those breaks sometimes.
Mm. Uh, I'm in sponge mode now already. You've given me about 7 different directions to go in here, which is awesome. I want to zero in on authenticity for a second and dig into what that means to both of you and how you think about this. Because you are 2 people who have nailed that, right? You show up in this very, I use the word genuine all the time to describe authenticity as well, right? It's real, right? They're just real pieces of ourselves that we're putting out there. But I'm interested to hear, particularly in the context of Tara, what you were saying about how you've changed in the 2+ years that you've been creating, so both of you are starting in, Nick, you're more on like the rev side, and Tara, you were coming from the sales side, Gravy, to where, like you're in at least slightly different places, right? Or Tara, it seems like you're in a very different place actually from where you were there. So that idea of like starting where you both kind of started in your niche, and me as well. And Nick, I don't know if you did Justin Welsh's operating system. Did you?
So I took it way later. Like,
Okay.
and actually, I'm trying to think. I didn't take the operating system. I took the second one that he did, because I was in his audience and income community. And I remember he was like, hey, you want to check this out. And so I checked it out. But I was like, this was like 2 years into this whole process.
Gotcha. But Tara, you did it, right? You did
Yeah,
it.
so I
Okay.
think we were all in that same community, and I did most of it. So
Okay.
kind of like there's definitely parts that I'm like, oh yeah, like we're already kind of down. But I also got his first course, I think, whichever
The
I think it
operating
was.
system. Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
okay, maybe it was. I thought it was
The,
one before.
the second one was the content creation, right?
Yeah.
I didn't.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Well, and I bring that up because
Yeah.
that was my start on this. Is like I was getting out of litigation a year ago this week, and the role I was transitioning into was going to be a sales role. And I was told I needed to learn LinkedIn, and LinkedIn had been nothing but my digital resume since 2008. I was like, all right, I'll learn, whatever. I had very low expectations. Um, did that course, decided to pick creativity as my corner to stand on because I've been studying creativity for 6 years, and have run my own little community around making progress on creative projects. So haters hate, creators create. Nick, I love that line. That's fantastic. And actually, I'll give a shout out to the Mavens of Merch, who the episode featuring them is dropping. We're recording this on Monday. It is dropping on Wednesday, October 26th. So it all comes together. It all comes full circle. But anyway, so when doing that course, like for me, my goal in getting involved on LinkedIn and starting to create content was to get in front of basically nonprofit leaders. So I was going into nonprofit consulting. Right? So I was just looking to gain traction so that I could get in front of them and also help my leadership team develop their presence on LinkedIn. So I chose creativity because I could just riff on it all day, every day. And now I find myself at this point where I'm making what I hope is an elegant shift that maybe people barely even notice. So I'm interested in that aspect from both of you, and let's just talk for a second about how you think about authenticity.
Ooh. I mean, so I'll kick things off. So for me, I want to be able to bring like my true self onto this platform. Like, I hate that people paint a perfect picture that everything is like so beautiful and like there's no failures out there and it's all successes. And you have these salespeople making, 7 figures and like, oh man, I want to be like them. I mean, even like, take someone like Justin Welsh, for example. He's awesome, but like, it's people, new creators come on and they see people like, a Justin Welsh or a Chris Walker or Dave Gerhardt. And they say like, I want to be like that because, I see all the money that they're making. I see like the followers that they have. However, you're setting yourself up for failure if you're trying to compare yourself to people that are years ahead of you. It's like, there's no overnight hacks, and there's people that are joining, pods and engagement groups and trying to game the system, which I think is silly to even do. Like, I don't see the benefit of that. But like for me, I just want to show up of like who I am. Like, I'll give you a good example. This past weekend, I posted a picture of my daughter in her Halloween costume. It was like a chocolate covered strawberry. And like we were at the zoo and I was like, you know what? Like I post pictures of her all the time. Like we were at a fair a couple of weeks ago. And like I want people to know who I am beyond just a marketer. And something that we do at Alice is like we talk about, everyone knows what your 9 to 5 is. You're a marketer, you're a salesperson, you're a founder, executive, whatever. But what are you passionate about in your 5 to 9 that truly makes who you are as an individual? And like that's the person that I want to connect with, and that's the person that I want others to basically get to know me as. Like for me, I play baseball, I have a 4-year-old daughter, I love Boston sports, and I want to kind of bring that onto the platform because I think it speaks to who I am as an individual and also rounds me out as a person. It's like, there's so many people that create content that only talk about like the professional aspect of it. It's like, and I get it, like that's fine. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but for me, I feel like people can get to know me on a deeper level when I do bring these personal things in and, sharing about baseball and sharing about all this other stuff. And to me, that's what like authenticity really means. It's like just being the same person online as I would be if we were to go grab a drink at the bar down the street. And like, it's funny because now that in-person events are back, there's so many people that I've met in real life that I've been following on LinkedIn for a while, and they are not who they seem to be in some cases. And it's really weird. Like and I don't want to like throw anyone under the bus, but like there's people that like they portray themselves as one way on LinkedIn. And then after talking to them for a few hours and grabbing some drinks, like completely different. And I'm just like, why do you pretend to be something that you're not when like this is really who you are? And they're like, well, this is what I think people want to see me as. And I'm like, well, like again, you should be authentic to yourself, and you shouldn't care what others think at the end of the day. And I know it's hard to say that in a world of like digital, but like at the end of the day, you need to look out for yourself. And like it's weird that people would want to do that or feel the need to do that. But I think that more and more people do that because they just want to portray an image to the masses, but that's not really who they are. And they feel like, well, hey, I might never see most of these people, so what really matters? And that's not authentic to me. And so for me, I will always be that same person regardless. And I mean, when we meet, whenever that is, you will be the same Nick as we are talking right now. And I can absolutely guarantee you that.
That's really well said. And I was hoping you were going to name names. I was looking forward to that part. I mean, and if you want to, you can. I promise. Nobody's going to hear this. It's just the three of us in here. But in my legal career, the way I thought about LinkedIn was just a place where I'm trying not to do anything to get fired, right? So it's like this idea of professionalism and how it seems to be changing very quickly. And it seems LinkedIn is a place where that shift is taking place in real time, where professional seemed to mean just fit in, right? Just stay buttoned up, don't actually show who you are, show who you think the world wants you to be, or who your industry leaders or your boss wants you to be, right? And so I can understand. Well, I guess that gets to the heart of this being authentic thing, right, Nick? Where you're saying that people, it turns out, oh, you're not actually like how you seem to be. In my career in law, that was everybody. Like when you actually talk to people for 20 minutes, you realize, oh, you aren't actually anything like the two-dimensional cardboard cutout that your headshot makes it look like you are, right? And it isn't it's a tremendous opportunity. But Tara, how do you think about it?
No, I love everything Nick said because it is true, but I think that I come at it from the angle of like, okay, we all have the buzzword personal brand, and I remember somebody talking about this once, and it was along the lines of like, hey, everybody has a brand, everybody has a personal brand. You just you just have to become aware of what it already is. We have a brand with our friends, we have a brand with our spouse or our partner, we have a brand with our kids, we have a brand with our work, our fellow workers. And it is interesting because I don't think that authenticity in the space that we're talking about, as far as LinkedIn, is necessarily for everybody. It's a journey, essentially. Like it is a journey of self-discovery, especially when you're creating content online. That I was authentic to who I was 2.5 years ago when I started creating. I am authentic to who I am now, but it's very different content. It was probably a lot more buttoned up back then because I just didn't know better. And at that point, I had different goals. So for me, it really should align not as much with like, hey, am I the same person, online sharing content as I am if I was hanging out with my best friend, and we're going out for a walk? In theory, my character should be, my
Mm,
characteristics, who I am. I
mm,
should be, if I am, kind, warm, welcoming, all of that. I mean, heck yeah, I want to be that online. If I'm a little bit more polarizing and like push the envelope, offline, then I want to bring that online, and really think through like, okay, when you are creating goals, when you are creating content, what are your goals, And so whenever I work with anybody or even myself, I love to go through this whole know, like, and trust. I think it's the sales in me scenario of content that surrounds those three pillars, so to speak, of like, hey, does this allow somebody to get to know you? Like actually know, to Nick's point, what I do in my life, like, am I somebody who really enjoys family time? Am I somebody who really enjoys, nature? Am I somebody who loves sports? Am I someone who loves music? Bring more of that so people say, hey, I feel like I know this person, or at least I know that part of them online, like them. And so whenever I work with this, it's a different, like, it's not so much likability as in like, oh, they're warm and fuzzy, but it's more like I like what they stand for. So coming with a point of view. So allowing people deeper, not, again, to Nick's point, not this is what I think people want me to say, but it's more, hey, these are opinions that I actually hold. And whether or not, and this is where I think my last maturity thing of like being mature people on LinkedIn plays such an important role to this authenticity thing of like, hey, I can authentically disagree with you and still like you and still like what you stand for and like who you are. And for me, more, I love the fact that you have such strong convictions and core beliefs, and you're willing to put them out there and other people tear down and come at you, but that's not going to change who you are. That to me is a likable person, whether or not I agree with them. And if you can have personal, like, I don't really agree with this, but more power to you, And then the last one is trust. And this is where I think most people, I think like you were both saying, most people spend their time there. They spend 99% of their LinkedIn content on their expertise, on their the how to, which is so important and it's vital, but it just stands so shallow when you don't bring the know and the like piece to it. So what I typically do is try to like put that on its head of like, that should be a part of your strategy. You should be putting out what you do, why field marketing, is winning now. What are the different thoughts around that? Again, that's where most people start. I started in all sales and SDR talk, because that's what I was doing. But then once I started realizing like, my gosh, I'm spending time here. Like I want people to know me, and I want people to like what I stand for, whether or not they agree with me. So that to me, when you can really paint a full picture of those three parts of you in your content, that's where I feel like, okay, they are a genuine person. And then if you can learn ways, whether it's through using video, using emojis, using wording, or in your comments to bring your personality, that's where I feel like people are like, okay, now when I meet Tara, when I meet Nick, when I meet Tony, I feel like I know them, I like them, and I can trust them. And shocker, I may want to work with them one day, or I may want to introduce them to someone who can help them, or I may just want to be their cheerleader, even if we never work together. And that's where I think relationships really come off the platform, and where you just become such a supporter of all of these people around you, even if there is no revenue tied to it, because you've aimed for the relationship the whole time.
No, I was just gonna say I completely agree with you. And what's interesting, I feel like the way that people create content like today, like present day compared to like when we got started, like I feel like there's people that try to take like templated angles, and like they're trying to figure out how the algorithm works versus just trying to be like who they are really. Like, you know, there's people that they don't, maybe they don't intentionally mean to game the system or whatever it is, but like they want to figure out like, okay, does Twitter screenshots work? Like, do videos work? Do photos work? Selfies apparently work now. Like it's people that like, they're trying to figure out the ways to leverage those things. But like, again, they're trying to do it to like grow as fast as they can, but they're not always being like their true, like genuine self.
Yeah, I'm a +1 on all that. And I know we've been in conversations similarly around just some different comments around that. And I am one of those people, I joke that I'm like the little engine that could, because I kind of exploded like you. And then the last 2 years, since I've just really reinvented myself, I've come away from so much of, I wouldn't say worrying about that, but there was so much of focus on year one of like, oh my gosh, you got to hit this milestone and be on this list and all of that. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, I don't get this. And then now it's like, I'm excited to show up and create great content and do the things that I love to do with the people I love to do them. And everybody, like all of these other conversations, they just start stressing me out because, like, again, genuine to myself, where I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what's the point of this? Like, I get it. If you want to your point, if you want to grow and you want to, I think somebody, Steve Watt, who I just love, says like, I'm not here to be in your funnel. Like, he said it much more eloquently, but I loved that because I'm like, look, we are humans at the end of the day. Like, nobody is coming here to be cold pitched, to be, hacked or gained. And that's the thing that I'm like, this isn't a game. Like, yes, the long game, like I get that, as in like people, we're building relationships and we're here. But if I'm creating things to actually help, and I say this all the time, I'm like, aim for relationships and the revenue often follows. But if you aim for revenue alone, you're going to miss out on both, and when we're talking about networking, we're talking about doing things in a way that I saw my father do as a doctor, and how I would drive around when I was 16 with a MapQuest map. We're talking back in 96. Way back then, giving these amazing pies to, other doctors' offices and, nurses and all, people who would refer their children, to his pediatric practice. And he just spent the entire year building relationships, knowing like, hey, there's definitely a mutual beneficial business end, but that's not the only end. And that's certainly not going to be, hey, if you can't serve me in my business, then you're dead to me, kind of thing. And so when I see those things come up and they present in awkward ways, like you're saying, of like pods and engagement hacks or all of these, to me, it's like, hey, you're playing the wrong game, and you're playing a game that ultimately you're going to lose. You may win, but that is not sustainable. And again, I am such a sustainable person where I'm like, I want to be here for the long haul. I want to love coming. And that may mean like, it's a longer, slower game, but that's okay. Like, I'm not here to like burn out and, try to do all these hacks that just feel disingenuous to me. Again, this is me. This is not saying I'm judging everybody, it's not like you do you, but I'm also like, I'm not surprised if these people, all of a sudden the algorithm change or things mess up and it's like, I'm out, So that's just how I approach it in a sustainable fashion for the long haul. And it's more fun because you get to meet some really great people.
Yeah, and I was just going to add one thing to that too. What's interesting is like and again, hey, if you want to use pods, engagement groups, whatever, like you do you, like you said, at the end of the day, like it's not for me. But what's interesting is you have these people that like, you post something and it immediately gets like 2,000, 3,000 reactions. But what's really interesting is like, you never see these people speaking at events, doing podcasts. It's like, all right, cool. Like anyone can be a tough person behind a keyboard. But like, are you really a thought leader? Are you subject matter expert? Do you want to be known as something and share your thoughts? Or do you just want to sit behind a keyboard and share Twitter screenshots all day? And like, again, nothing against people that do that, but like, it's interesting that you see that some of these people that get massive likes and, have massive followings, they're not the ones that are, out there doing additional things for themselves that are probably also driving revenue at the end of the day. And I always found that fascinating. It was like, listen, like, I'm not going to get the massive engagement and the massive likes that many will. And like, I've built a decent following, but I can tell you that like, I've done over 80 podcasts in the last like 2 years. And like, I've spoken at events and I've driven, hundreds. This year I'll drive $1 million in pipeline for Alice. And it's like, I think that's more impactful to the content that I create versus just trying to like, I want 5,000 likes on every single post, because like, who cares? Like if there are a bunch of people that like aren't going to add value to your feed and to your business, it's just it's the dopamine pits. Like people want that dopamine to feel good, but like, does feeling good equal revenue? Not usually. Sometimes, maybe.
The revenue feels good. I can work for that. It definitely feels good. Well, I want to dig into that a little bit is so both of you rely on LinkedIn for driving revenue in different ways, right? So Nick and Alice and Tara with your company. So as somebody who is, I'm 9 months plus into my daily posting, and like I've seen some of the ways the game changes, and frankly the way life changes as a result of doing this deal, and it's been incredible. I find myself at a point of, well, frankly, wanting to hear from people who are farther down the path than I am, who are a year and a half farther down this journey. Um, how do you think about, mm, how to articulate this, the connection between the two, for lack of a better term? And I don't need to say more than that. You know how to take it from there. Nick, what do you think about that?
It's, for me, it's like the connection is like, listen, like I don't talk about, for me it's a little different because like I'm not a like solopreneur, like doing my own thing. Like I work for a company, and so the company benefits from me working here, because of the pipeline that I'm able to create and the revenue I'm able to bring. Like, do I see that revenue directly? No, but I understand it impacts the business. Plus I know that I'm setting myself up for future success, that I never have to apply to a job again. Like I could get laid off today, and hopefully I could post on LinkedIn that I lost my job, unfortunately, which would suck, but like I would get a ton of DMs, hopefully, unless I did something completely wrong these last 2.5 years. And I would be able to be selective about what I want to do next and not have to rely on, oh man, I'm struggling. Like I got to figure out, like, take the first job I can because I need to put food on the table for my family. And I think that's why, like, just it's the company is like renting your brand. And I've been trying to like get away from using the word like personal branding a little bit, and more so talking about like building an audience and like building a community. And I'm changing, my whole podcast around this because I feel like it's been so talked about for these last couple of years, and I feel like it's shifting into that like audience mindset now. It's like audience first, like, it's everything around that. And so I just think that these companies are renting the brand that you bring to them, and it's like a win-win while you're there. But like ultimately you're going to move on. My mom's worked for Raytheon now for like 45 years, and she just hit it last month. And like she's like, you've had like 7 or 8 jobs in these last like 10 years. And I was like, Mom, like things are completely different. Like it's not like, this is her only job she's ever had. She didn't go to college, like right out of high school, to Raytheon for this entire time, and she'll retire in a couple of years. And like I was just like, it's different. And I was just like, I create content so that I don't have to worry about this. And I jump jobs because I know I can get 20 to 30% higher pay as well. And I can do some side hustles on it too. And I think all of that plays into like, a lot of the reasoning behind it. But one last thing that I was going to touch on is like, in the content that I create, I actually don't talk about Alice at all. I would say in like 98% of it, I don't talk about Alice at all, because I know what's going to happen is when people click my profile and they say, oh, like, cool, what does this person do? They're going to see, one, like my headline, what I specifically do for Alice. And then they're going to say, oh, cool, what does Alice actually do? Oh, it's a gifting platform, a direct mail. Oh, I'm looking to run some type of program like that. I'm going to go fill out a demo request. And then how did you hear about us? I'm going to put Nick because I saw him on LinkedIn. And I can't tell you how many times I see that on a weekly basis now. And I'm not talking like, there's a lot of like smaller accounts, but last week there was a 30,000 person company that came in that specifically called me out from like seeing me on LinkedIn. Now, like if that deal can come in and close, like it's massive. Like it's just, and just think about that. One deal can, like one LinkedIn post can change the whole trajectory of that. And so it's been really fascinating to see. And like, that's been my whole mindset behind everything.
Cool. And Nick, I know you need to bounce in a minute. Tara,
Oh yeah.
are you okay to stay for a few more minutes after? Okay. We're gonna let him, and then we'll get to the good stuff after he's gone. But I wanted to touch just real quick on what you were saying around getting away from personal branding, because I, in my mind, the two of you have been immersed in this idea for a couple years now, right? And it is everywhere when you're in it. I'm stepping back. I've fallen ass backward into starting a venture around helping law firms starting to leverage the platform. And I don't know if I'm the first. I'm pretty close to the first, right? Like there are so many industries that just have no idea and they're going to figure it out. And like that 4% number, which is incredible, like going from 1 to 4, like what happens if that number goes to 10 or 20? I mean, which it very well could, right? I mean, it's going to get crazy. So I'm just interested in how you are thinking about that shift.
Yeah, I think it's why, diversifying is so important. And so like for me, LinkedIn will always be my number one platform. I have a Twitter. I've got 3,000 followers there, but I don't create content there anymore. It's more to consume. TikTok is like my number 2 right now. And so like all I've really been doing is taking my LinkedIn content and then repurposing it into video format because I already have the text written posts. I'm just taking that and either like building on it or something like that. And I've been doing that for about 6 months now. And then about a week ago, I was like, you know what? I already have these videos. Why aren't I putting these on Instagram Reels? And why aren't I putting this on YouTube Shorts, which are 2 huge, like YouTube Shorts right now is the next thing to blow up. Like guarantee you, like TikTok is still some good organic reach, but like everything that I've been reading is saying like YouTube Shorts specifically is the next thing that's going to absolutely skyrocket. So if you're looking to diversify and you already have video content out there, it's more so just, distributing it at scale onto these additional platforms because there's going to be different audiences for the most part that see it. So it's, why not get it out there? Because something that maybe just randomly goes viral on like Reels, but maybe not TikTok, it's like, you never know. But if you're not on these platforms, and yeah, it's a little bit extra work because you got to have the account, you got to do some engaging, you got to like be active, and it's hard because we all have other stuff going on. But I'm trying to test it. I really wanted to more so see like what was the difference between Reels and TikTok and like the creation of video content across that. And then, hey, you could push it over to LinkedIn if you really wanted to. But I just think that's going to be a great way to think about it for the future as more and more organic reach goes down because more creators are creating. I think that you just have to be able to diversify. And it's like, I just created a newsletter. Just there's so many different things that you can do to, again, be able to create content from and then like distribute at scale. It's just figuring out and testing different things, but it comes back to bandwidth at the end of the day as well.
Right on. I appreciate that. And well, that seems like a good note to leave you on. This is the first one where I'm letting one guest go while they my initial thought when I had the idea for this podcast a few months ago was that it almost had like a Mr. Rogers feel where like the show starts, I put on the sweater, somebody knocks on the door, you let one person in, then 5 minutes later there's a knock on the door again, somebody else is there. So this is kind of like that. Maybe we'll play with that. But Nick, thank you for joining us, man. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Definitely. Likewise. Yeah, no, super excited for this. Thank you so much for having me. I'll talk to you guys soon.
All right. See ya.
All right. Bye.
How very natural.
And in there too.
All right. So circling back to what I was asking around authenticity, building your presence and how that ties to revenue. Now you had the perspective of the SDR who was doing it and trying to drive revenue at Gravy way back when, 2 years ago or whatever. I'm interested in what that's like for you now with where you're at and having your own shop, and particularly with your approach that you're talking about here, where you do, let's say, you take a gentler approach to content creation and than some people might. But how do you think about that? And let's say for one of the main groups of people that I'm making this podcast for is like people trying to gain traction or trying to build something like what you have. So how do you think about, or how has that gone for you basically?
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways, while I'm very rebellious to kind of traditional LinkedIn, as in, yeah, probably the softer side. And most people will be like, how do you even get traction? Or maybe call me vanilla, or because I'm not, polarizing. But again, I'm like, I'm not that person in real life. Like, I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader and supporter more than I'm going to try to like rip you apart. Like, I'm just not going to do that, and I think maybe that has to do with more my age. I mean, I'm aging myself, I'm 42, so I've seen a lot, and I think I was probably spicier in my younger years. And not that I'm not spicier in other ways, I just think that I share a lot of the grief and the battle that I've been through personally in my life of losing both of my parents, losing babies. Like, I think when you walk through so much loss, that all of a sudden a lot of the more polarizing and maybe nitpicking, content or things like that, it's just not appealing to me, because that's not appealing to who I am in my personal life, offline. Like, I want to be somebody who's really for people, and for theirs. So that ties directly, I believe, to revenue, because of also my belief very strongly, even though I was outbound when I was an SDR, and then when I started building and I was an SDR manager, I'm all about like, go for it. If you need something, put yourself out there, find people who need your service, and just go, or your product or whatever it is. And I still believe that very strongly. But for me, the content creation angle of it has been completely inverse, where it's been 100% inbound. It has, ever since from when I started creating content and getting leads before I even knew, like, oh my gosh, people actually come to you. Like, I had no idea this was a thing, because my entire, job was going out, not waiting for inbound leads, for sure, talking to inbound leads, but being a writer and people naturally seeing, hey, you're a great writer, or I really like the way you say this, or I like the way you think. Could you write for me? And I was like, well, of course I can. I've been an editor. I've been, my whole journey actually being in sales and in marketing was actually not what I didn't go to school for that. I went to school to be a journalist, and I was an editor and a writer in different ways. So coming to LinkedIn and showing off my skills, I realized, like, oh my gosh, I don't have to be overt. I don't have to say, buy my services or hire me. Every post I put out was a business card, and it still is.
All right, I want to dig into that a little bit. So at what point did you start writing for other people or supporting other people in that on LinkedIn?
So pretty quickly, within probably my first month, I actually got my first freelance, hustle, so to speak, of somebody. It was not ghostwriting LinkedIn post. I was nowhere near that. But it was doing just some different blog content, and just some different, kind of freelance. I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, they're coming to me to do some stuff. And, so I thought that was awesome. But within about 6 months, and then that's actually lined up with when I transitioned out of my full-time role because of different reasons of stage of life and having little ones and really wanting to spend home, and pandemic. Like, I've spent whole podcasts just talking about really being someone who leans into my seasons of life. And not being somebody who carried the solopreneur banner of like, this is what I'm going to do and everybody should do it. I don't think that way. I think it's worked for me for now. And I could easily see myself working for a company again. I don't know. But I work with companies now, and I work with a lot of them. So it was a very natural transition of people just coming, to me saying, hey, could you do this for me? And then transitioning to actually doing it. So taking the time to do the work before talking about it at all, and transitioning my content from being very sales and SDR leadership focused to more leadership, which I still love. That's part of my background as well. And into writing and into more content creation which is what I started to do full time very quickly after I left, and, built this whole thing up. But 100% of my clients have been inbound. And so I believe very strongly in attraction marketing and magnetic marketing, I call it, where it's, you're both attracting and pulling in people who want to work with you because like, and trust you, as well as, repel out people that probably wouldn't be good fits. So magnets work both ways. And I think it's so strong when you can position yourself through hopefully my character as much as what I'm writing. So who I am as much as what I'm doing, because I do believe that you can be the best writer in the world, but if you're a jerk, somebody's probably not going to want to work with you. But I also think you can be polarizing and you can be strong and you can have very strong opinions and still be magnetic and still people be very likable and be very like, wow, I want to work with them.
That's spot on. So I'm amazed that everything you do is inbound. That's fantastic. Do you have any sort of niche or focus in terms of the types of leaders or the types of companies that you work with, or is it kind of across the board?
Definitely across the board. I mean, there are certain things that I'm like, right away, no way, as in like, I just don't have experience and, crypto tech, like a lot of the more technical backgrounds, I'll refer, almost immediately, not because like I couldn't learn it, but I'm also like, you're not going to get the best part of me. I really stand more in the leadership bracket of, VPs, C-suites, directors, and above the executive level, because a lot of the clients I work with, we're not diving into the weeds. I like to keep them more visionary and then empower their team to dive into the weeds more. But when you're talking about a founder, a CEO, a C-suite and above, like they're going to be more vision leaders and strategic leaders. And so that's where I work very naturally, because that's how I've worked with my bosses before, and not as their ghostwriter as much as just their, almost like their right hand, their soundboard. And I'm a visionary and an idea person as well. So it naturally connects, I think, with those. But I've worked with people across all kinds of both service and SaaS, industries.
That's really interesting. And I'm listening to what you're saying, and then I'm trying to think about how that applies to, say, all those copywriters and writers and people trying to break into basically building up their own freelancing business, right? And the the advice to niche down is, as you know, very popular. And in my mind, there's a lot of value in doing that, just in terms of trying to cut through the noise, right? To be specific enough that somebody can recognize what you do in a way that they might want to hire you. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, so based on your timeline, it sounds like you were fairly early to the game when it comes to LinkedIn. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm wondering whether that's what you did. How do you do that? Can you do that today? Can somebody else do that today? Do you think,
Yeah.
or what do you think about that? I'm
So
sure
I have a
people
lot
ask you this all the time.
Yeah. It's actually one of my favorite things to talk about, because just because my journey has been very different, I'm also the first to say my journey is my journey. Like, it's not your journey. It's not, if I was to start today, what I would do. I benefited, in so many ways from having a leader go before me again, and having somebody that I was able to learn from and to be encouraged by. And most people, 90, I mean, what 1,000% of people don't get that, when you're starting on LinkedIn. So I know that. So I don't try to say, hey, copy my exact strategy. No way. When I'm mentoring ghostwriters, it's very different. It's very like, you're probably going to have to go outbound. I definitely say, like, hey, if you are going to be writing for a living, it's anything else. Like, your post is your business card, so put them out there, showcase your creativity, showcase the way you think, because we're all different. So you think about, not only are you going to be working with different, niches and industries, but you think different, so you might think, okay, well, I'm one of a million ghostwriters right now, or isn't LinkedIn ghostwriting saturated? Because there are definitely some bigger voices and bigger names who are doing this. And I'm like, no, like, it's insane. I literally turn down every single day, and I am at capacity and beyond. And it's also because it's just one of me. I kind of tried to do like, okay, what if I hired other people? And and it just didn't work for me. But again, if I wanted to scale and grow a huge, I totally could. So I'm like, no, like, there is so much more demand than there is, people able to meet that demand. But you are also, while there are a million industries and a million different people you could write for, you're also one of a kind, so it may seem like, oh gosh, there's 500 LinkedIn ghostwriters or, consultants. I'm moving more into the consultant field as well, because I'm like, there's only one of me and I want to help more people. And I can only work really with 3 to 5 clients at a time max. And then I'm like, host, so in order to expand that, I'm going to have to expand myself and stretch, and I'll probably have to go more outbound and do some things that I haven't done, because I'm going to be doing a different, service in a lot of ways. But when it comes to writing, everybody is so unique. Your style is unique. And specifically with ghostwriting, putting yourself out there, what you think, why you think what you're thinking, how you think, like constantly using every single post as a way to showcase your writing and your thinking skills, your strategic skills, and how you would work with other people, because in this industry, you have to be as much of a great steward of your characteristics and your ability to extract knowledge from other people, because the point of a ghostwriter is you go away, so it's not so much like, hey, you have to love my writing, but it's more, hey, you have to trust my writing. You have to trust that I'm a good writer, but also you have to trust that we're going to have a conversation that I can ultimately set myself apart in a way that I can write for you, and I can write differently. So none of that happens online. Like, none of that happens publicly. So all of my public posting now, or in the sense of, if I'm trying to attract clients, it would be that I want to get them in the exact way that Nick does, which is, if they're interested enough, they're going to click on my profile, see my banner, read about what I do, and contact me. And that, to me, is the most genuine, authentic way of running a business, because you are drawing them to say, hey, I want to work with, Tony. I want to work with, Nick. I want to work with these people because I know them, I like them, and I trust them. And I think that they're a dang good writer, so it doesn't matter if there's 50 other people out there doing what you do. I am such an abundance mindset person, not just because like I see it every day, but I genuinely believe it, because you're also not everybody's going to mesh with every single client. So having a specific expertise and specialty. And I'm like, I literally would rebrand, I know we're using that word, but rebrand every ghostwriter as something different, because we are different and we love to write about different things, so I think you're brilliant coming out saying, hey, I'm going to work with attorneys because that's my background. I know what they need, and this is exactly how I'm going to do it. I can't tell you one other attorney writer or attorney consultant, for LinkedIn off the top of my head, but I guarantee you could line up every single person who wants to do this, and you can find that one thing that's unique and individual to you that you can absolutely leverage, because you don't need a million clients. I promise you. And you don't want a million clients. I promise you.
No. That's the path to destruction. Um, yeah, that's well said. And I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, my take on creativity, um, the way I think about it now is just collecting dots and connecting them in a way that you can make something new and valuable. And you know, this thing I've fallen into is just a matter of, like, journalism was actually my first trajectory as well, as a copy editor and columnist, and yeah, and so I've taken writing seriously for a long time, right? Then I spent 12 years as an attorney. I fell into this LinkedIn thing, and having it turn, and you put all those things together and boom, you got a new thing. But I think something people tend to get ahead of themselves on is maybe wanting to niche down too fast, where it's saying, okay, I like fitness, I'm going to be a fitness writer. and just like picking it and then going all in on that thing, maybe without having a more of a background than other people, or maybe more of a foundation already laid. And I'm thinking of, I have a few people in mind who are kind of like, you'll see them kind of bounce around maybe every 6 months. It's like, I've got a new approach. I've got a new thing I'm going after. And I guess my point in this is just, it does take time to figure some of this stuff out. And so I think of you as a really excellent example for how to write. And by the time I ran across you, almost a year ago now, you had done that transition from the sales specific stuff toward more general, like leadership writing. And frankly, like some of the most heartfelt stuff that you can find on the platform, right? And so by the time I ran across you, that's the space you were in a way that I think is, for new writers, I think there's a lot to be said for that, about the focusing on showing up genuinely. And if you feel like you don't know anything, then maybe you could talk about how you don't know anything, and like just whatever it is about, even if that's not knowing anything, like lean into that and lean into the real thing. But I want to be mindful of your time, but I did want to touch on something that I think we have in common, and that I found really, really, frankly, helpful in your example as a writer. And it is, you are invariably positive in what you do. And I think that's right. I've never seen, like you were saying, I've never seen you tear anybody down. I've never seen you even really be negative, even when you're sharing really difficult stuff. And in my approach, I've done that as well. And to your point, like, I am a very opinionated person. I have a lot of strong opinions. Somewhere along the line, there's that decision of, would you rather be right or be happy? And I decided I'd rather be happy. So it's fine that not everybody thinks like I think. And in this environment we're in online, where so much gets polarized, and Facebook or Twitter just turn into absolute cesspools of toxicity, I find it amazing that LinkedIn is not that. You can find it but you almost have to go looking for it, right? Like, yeah. It's been amazing to me to find a supportive place where, frankly, based on what I know about you, I think you and I probably disagree on a number of things, but and maybe that could be said for a lot of people, right? But I find, to your point of like knowing, liking, trusting, I do feel like I know you. I feel like I like you, and I do trust you. I trust you as a human being, and I trust you as a writer for what you do. And I'm going to jujitsu this into a question here in a second. But I do find that to be so powerful, and it's part of why I started this podcast. It's an amazing dynamic where we are able to have these conversations. And I liked what you said about that being authentic, revealing your character and leaning into your character. And people of high character can indeed have different opinions on different things, right? Like, character is not inherently tied to one or the other. You know what? I'm not even going to ask a question. I'm just going to leave that out there and have you take it from there.
Yeah. I mean, again, like, talk about something I could talk about till I'm blue in the face. Like, this is definitely something. And, the one thing too, that just to say, like, this isn't a talk about perfection. You know, I talk about this a lot of like, I choose connection over perfection. And let me tell you, I can be a jerk. I can suck. I can hate myself. I can yell at my kids. Like, I can be cold to my husband. I can be jealous and spiteful. I mean, I am human, you know? And just because I don't bring that part of me online, because that's a part of me I don't like. That is the toxic part of me that I am working through therapy, you know, and like year and recovery and like all these things of being 40s of like, okay, I need to leave that stuff in the past and hopefully become who I actually am and who I want to be and who I think all of us truly genuinely want to be. But that's not to say like, oh my gosh, you're just a perfect person with this high moral character and standard. I'm like, shit, you know, I don't like me sometimes. That doesn't mean I'm going to bring that part of me on LinkedIn, because if something is going to trigger me or is going to be like, you know, I could totally just write something snarky. I mean, every single person can, you know, and for someone to say like, okay, you're not being genuine because you're not being, you know, you're not engaging in this toxic behavior, or you're not saying what you really think, or, you know, deep down. And I'm like, no, like actually my silence is what's communicating more. And honestly, that's better for me, because I know if there's something that's triggering me online, it has way less to do with that person or that thing and more to do with something that's going on inside of me. And I need to take the time offline to find out who I am and come back. And that's the only way after 3 years I can stay positive. Because even LinkedIn, you're right, while it's not the successful some other platforms, and it's also why I choose to not spend my time on other platforms, because I know myself and I don't want to be around something that is going to make me more and more negative, you know, for the sake of other people's polarizing, you know, point of view or whatever. So when I am online, I do choose to be more positive, not because I don't have negativity in my life or because I'm like an overwhelmingly like perfect person, but because I know that that's what helps me be the best person that I genuinely want to be. And I want to help other people be that person too. You know, like I want to show up as someone's encourager, supporter, because that is genuine to me. And in fact, that's a part of me that is more genuine than, you know, kind of the icky stuff that we all feel and see and can acknowledge. Yes, I can bring that into my content, and probably will more, you know, as I'm like, hey, look, like I struggle too. I fail all the time. I've lost clients. I mean, because we just couldn't connect. Like I'm not perfect, you know, by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm choosing kindness. And I did write about this because I believe that when we actually choose to not react and when we don't go the negative bent immediately, that is actually the more costly choice, because it causes us to have to put down our ego, to have to put down our anger, to have to put down our right, you know, that we've got all these rights that we're holding up, and instead choose to take, and I heard this from someone else, the long walk, called empathy, around to the other person's point of view and try to see from it, even if I don't agree. And then if there is a conversation that needs to be had, we're going to have it offline. You know, like I'm not going to be a person to publicly put out anybody, because I wouldn't want somebody to do that for me if and when I do something stupid online, which I'm sure it'll happen, you know? So it to me just comes down to, you know, me showing up genuinely who I want to be, not even like a fake person, but who I try to be in my real life and who I am working hard to be always. And that is the side of me that I want people to know that they've got that part of them too, and that we don't have to be negative to just get, you know, eyes on our stuff. You know, we can actually be positive and genuinely be that person.
Mm, that's
I'll get off
beautiful. No, I we share that soapbox, and you are somebody who's been an example to me of how to effectively do that in an environment where it's not readily obvious that that's really even available, or if you try it, that aren't you just going to get trolled out of the building, right? That aren't you? Do you have problems with trolls?
There are, I mean, there's definitely been some passive aggressive comments and, you know, on other people's stuff or that, but far and away, it has been positive and supported, because I do think most of us try to be adults, you know, and it's like, if you don't like someone's content, or you think they're too soft, or you think they're too, you know, floaty positive, then unfollow or block or whatever, just be gone, you know? And so I'm lucky that I think most of those people, again, magnets repelling that I've probably kind of repelled outside of my like, happy words. I'm like, I didn't name my business sad words or angry words, like it's hopefully pretty happy and positive. But sure. I mean, I get comments and I get things like that. And I'm like, I just block. I used to try to engage, but now I'm like, literally like, you're not worth my mental health. And there's something going on. Now that is so rare. And I'm like, this person clearly has, and it usually will take me a couple times unless it's just blatant. But, if it's more than that, then I'm like, guys, we don't have to deal with this, and my positivity, so to speak, or my optimism, it's probably a better word for it, has been born off the back of real, true life grit, loss, death, hopelessness, despair, addiction, pain. Like it is not born off of this, cloud that I think I live on, and butterfly and rainbow land. Like it's actually been through really hard stuff that I've had to spend many years really hard working on. And so that's the kind of positivity that I want to bring, is like, this is born off of reality. This isn't born off of la la land.
Mm. I love that, and it really resonates. And my foundation for what I do out here is similarly informed. I would say I choose to be optimistic and I choose to be positive, not because my life is all unicorns and rainbows, but because there's enough darkness as is. I don't need to go along on the internet bringing darkness with me. And I'll just say that on the authenticity piece, and I think this is something where a lot of people get caught up. Saying authentic doesn't mean sharing everything. Authentic just means sharing things that are true to you. But we are able to choose what we put out there amongst the things. As Whitman said, we contain multitudes, right? As you said earlier. And we're able to be authentic without being totally unfiltered and just airing all the laundry. We're totally able to do that. All right, Tara, I want to be mindful of your time. You've been really gracious to hang out with me this long. Your LinkedIn profile is going to be included in the show notes. Is there anything else you want people to know about where to find you?
Yeah, so you can find me online as well, happywordsell.com. So that's where I put my services, my offerings. I'm going to be making some updates to those because, like I said, ghostwriting has been my thing, but that is kind of peaking out. And so I'm able to do more workshops, consulting, and just to give more of me to more people, hopefully, as we enter 2023. But I do want to add one thing just to kind of end your point about not oversharing, that I do think that there is a line for all of us and it really is internal. But I think I put, or somebody said something where it's like, hey, when you're putting out content, instead of thinking it about like, it's not really Dear Diary, it's more like Dear Abby, and like looking for advice. Is this helpful? If someone's reading this, can they take something from it? Is it touching? Is it educational? Is it entertaining? And then if not, I always say press pause before you press post and just try to process privately before you post publicly. And then if you're still like, whatever, guns a-blazing, I'm putting it out there and you feel good about it, then go for it, because I think we're often our own worst critic. And the stuff that has like made me shake in my boots that I've ended up posting has honestly, once I've done those other things of like, let me process this, has been some of the things that people still talk to me about that was impactful for them. So then I know I've hit the mark. But you're right. I think that we've all got to do a little bit of digging before we just put anything and everything out there.
Brilliant. That's a great note to end it on. Thank you for listening to the episode. If you wouldn't mind subscribing, or if you're feeling really generous, leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Can you do that on Spotify? I don't even know if you can do that, but Apple's the one I really care about, actually. And that's just because Apple is the app I use. But I would be much obliged. And I'm really grateful for your time and your attention. I know there are there's no shortage of pulls on your attention. So thank you very much. And I've got a book out in the creative arena. It's available on Amazon. You can find Nick at Rep Your Brand, his podcast, which again is fantastic. You can find both Nick and Tara obviously on LinkedIn. All these links are in the show notes. And we'll do it again next week when I am again entering a room with a couple people who I feel dwarfed by in terms of my understanding of how to effectively grow a community and leverage the network to grow an audience. And that'll be Darren McKee and Salman Muhuddin. So should be an awesome episode. And I'll see you out in LinkyLand. Have a good one, y'all.